Alright, jerk-offs, we're coming to you quietly with my quiet voice on because at the moment it is 2 a.m. in the morning. That's right, 2 a.m. I need to get this intro recorded because I'm about to fly to Estonia. Doing some gigs in Estonia. Don't know if you got any friends in Tallinn, but send them along. Actually, it might be all over by the time this thing comes out. But yes, I'm waiting for a train to Luton Airport for a 6 a.m. flight, and it appeared to be easier just to stay up rather than go to bed, wake up. I had a gig late down at the Backyard Comedy Club, my favorite club where we do the Australia show, and I only got home around midnight, so I was like, screw it, let's do it. Stay up till 6 a.m. when the flight is. Oh, what a dream it's going to be. Rolling into Estonia feeling like $1,000,000. But obviously one of the cool things about being in the UK is the fact that there are so many places nice and close by. And I'll be honest with you, I booked the Estonia flights maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a month, I don't know. And it is £17 one way. That's absurd. That's $30. $30 to go to Estonia, to go like 11 countries across. And I mean, I think my favorite bit is then tonight I booked the train to get to Luton, and that was 1760. So somehow the train to the other part of London actually cost more than the flight all the way to a foreign land. Beautiful. That is budget airlines and privatized rail in operation. Got to feel good about that. But no, I want to get into this episode. It's a very fun episode. It is with none other than Ro Campbell. If you're aware of comedy, you might still not know who Ro Campbell is, but if you're in comedy, if you're a comedian, if you're a producer, if you're in the industry in any way, I guarantee you will know Ro Campbell. He is a man, he's a myth, he's a legend. He's originally from Adelaide in Australia, and he now calls Edinburgh home. Well, I mean, he does get around a lot, but I think Edinburgh would be considered his home base, and it has been for a long time. The first time I did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which obviously gets mentioned quite a bit on this podcast, the first time I did that, I'd met Ro at the Adelaide Fringe, and he was kind of like my guide, my chaperone to Edinburgh. He ran a daily show in this pub called the Bannermans, which is this kind of grungy, weird rock cave that suits Ro 100%. He's got his jokes for the Bannermans. That's how long he's been doing the gig there. He's got the jokes about the bathrooms. He's got the jokes. He knows how to set up the room. He's got his little routine with the sound desk. And he's got this loyal following of weird people who come and check out these gigs. And cause he does know everybody, some days the lineup there is fucking insane. I did that with people who, like, everyone else on the lineup had been on TV. And it's a free show at 5:30 p.m. in a pub that looks like it should be closed down. But anyway, he was telling me all the stories that year, all the stories, different entertainment things. So I'm very excited for you guys to hear this chat with him, because like any chat with Ro Campbell, there are several anecdotes. There is absolutely no narrative to the thing. It's going to jump around a bit. I'll do my best to keep him on track, but that is difficult. But yeah, check him out. And just I want to thank a couple of listeners, the couple of jerk-offs who came down to my album launch last week at 2 North Down. That was really sweet of you. It was a great show. I got all my favourite London comedians to do covers of my jokes, and they used that as an opportunity to make fun of me. It was bloody great. If you want to listen to the special or the album, everything is released now. If you are outside of Australia, grab it on iTunes. If you're in Australia, you can get the album on iTunes, but you need to get the video on either Amazon Prime or Vimeo. That's right, that's where you can get it. And if you like the pod, please do get in touch. muggletondaniel@gmail.com is my email. If you email me, I will reply. On Twitter @Dan Muggleton, Instagram @Dan Muggleton, or just message the Union Jackoff page on Facebook. I would love to hear from you. And as always, if you do like the podcast, please tell people. We're growing this thing this year. 2019 is our year, guys. And if you tell one person about the podcast you love so secretly, I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Anyway, enough of that. Let's crack on with the very mysterious, the mega bus rider, the king, Ro Campbell. The preparation is done. The notes are assembled.
Cool.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Don't mention the notes, mate.
Why not? The notes are mentioned. That was the start of the podcast. We've started.
Just in case there's any lulls, I've got shit to talk about.
I think anyone who's listened to any of these pods would know there's absolutely been not a single lull this entire.
Okay, well that's.
We're 16.
Who have you had on, mate? Like
16 episodes.
Who's been the big guest? Who's been your?
I mean, I still am very fond of the episode with Mark Nelson. I enjoy that episode a lot.
That's good. That's the only one I've listened to, funnily enough, because I was going to do the week after, or we were going to record an episode the week after.
Yeah, and then
it didn't happen. So I was listening to Mark. Obviously, Mark is a contemporary of mine, and we started at the same time and all that. So I respect Mark as a comic and a person, etc. But so I listened to that one, and I actually took notes and feedback.
Yeah, you took some feedback off that.
I did. Because there was a few. I've actually still got some of the stuff written down here.
You got your notes.
There was something that you said on that podcast just stunned, fucked, and amazed me, and it should be pointed out. How old are you?
I'm 29 years old.
You're 29. Okay, that's how old I was when I started.
Really?
Stand up. I'm 43, and you said that none of your friends had ever seen Crocodile Dundee. None. And I was like, well, what are you fucking talking about? Dude, you were like, that's not even that big a film in Australia. And I'm like, mate, that's a millennial fucking observation. It came out in 86, so you weren't born. That was huge. That's probably in the top 3 memories I have of the cinema as a child. I still remember queuing for that to go and see it at the local fucking, what's it called, this old Victorian era cinema in the suburbs of Adelaide. And
you remember the Dundee? It was a big moment. It was
his big film. Yeah, it's a shit cheesy mainstream film. And also because you were discussing Train Spotting, and you were like that to Mark. Oh, I guess Australia's Train Spotting would be like Crocodile Dundee or something, but I haven't even seen that. But I'm like, that's not Australia's Train Spotting. That's a completely, that's the wrong. Australia's Train Spotting would be Romper Stomper. I would say Romper Stomper would be the
right.
Yeah, or maybe Priscilla, something like that.
But like Romper Stomper, it wasn't supposed to be like indicative of like everyday Australian.
Well, do you think Train Spotting's everyday Scotland?
But I thought they were supposed to be like this.
No, it's just a microcosm. It's that small world.
What's
the world of people sticking needles in their arms?
But that Rubber Stomp is the Russell Crowe one, right? Like the first Russell Crowe.
Please tell me you've seen it.
I've never seen Rubber Stomp.
Oh my god! Dude,
why?
What's going on with the youth of today?
You've
got so much access to this shit.
I've just seen The Castle like 5 times.
You don't even have to go to Blockbuster anymore. It's probably on YouTube.
What do you mean it's probably on YouTube? It's definitely on the internet somewhere. And it's impossible to go to Blockbuster. What do you mean you can't go to Blockbuster? Blockbuster doesn't exist.
That's what I mean.
It's over.
You don't have to. Well, you can't even.
You can't yeah.
If you wanted to, yeah.
Even if I really wanted to go to Blockbuster.
Romper Stomper, yeah. It's about, racial... far right fucking nutters in Melbourne. And I suppose... if you call it racism. But that was a very big thing at that particular time. It certainly was going on where I grew up in Adelaide. We had a fucking bunch of crazy right-wing nutters called National Action. They had a leader. His name was Michael Brander. He was a fucking typical... He was an immigrant too, fucking born to a Spanish mother. And they targeted me because my first girlfriend at university was a black African exchange student, Meki Kapunda from Namibia.
Finally getting a shout out.
Yeah, that's weird. And they targeted me a few times, man. They used to call me, corner me at the uni campus and give me shit. But I just thought they were all fucking goons,
So that was what year was this? What kind of period we talking?
1994. That was
1994, and now we've just had the.
I wasn't scared of Michael Brand. I was a bit scared of his goons because, like anyone who follows, they were somewhat fucking loose cannons. But looking back, they were at Adelaide Uni. You know what I mean?
Right. They were university students.
I don't know if they all were university students, but they used to hang around there because the Adelaide Uni Bar used to have 60-cent pots.
60 cent?
Yeah, so like that used to attract a rough element. And Michael Brander was doing like a PhD in Hitler or something.
Right.
Right.
So he was taking it real serious.
Yeah, and he was older. He was probably like late 20s. So he had these dudes that used to follow him around.
Yeah.
And, and I attracted this rep as, small campus as the, I don't want to say it on air, but they used to call me, someone who liked black people, basically.
Okay.
And
that included a racial slur, I assume, that title.
Yeah, and they used to have these little rallies, and then it all peaked. There was 2 major violent incidents in Adelaide that involved national action. One was where they ran down Rundle Mall just bashing anyone of colour. I bet they didn't touch any Indigenous people because they had a fucking beaten 7 shades of shit out of them. But just picking on old Asian women or whatever, probably.
Jeez.
And then I was in a pub. I was in the Crown and Anchor, which you might know if you've been to Adelaide.
I know the Crown and Anchor.
Yeah, the Cranker it's called now, and it has comedy there as well. And that pub hasn't changed much in my life, and it's kind of punk rock pub. And they got kicked out of there because they didn't want racists in there. And they came back in with metal bars, jumped the bar, started smashing all the staff over the heads, and I was in there when that happened.
Oh, jeez.
And we were on the news and stuff, yeah.
Right. So there were actually some flare-ups. It wasn't just
Yeah,
rhetoric.
I know they were capable of violence. But I saw Michael Brander and his mum having lunch once in a restaurant in Adelaide, and I just stood at the window and fucking eyeballed him, and I just thought, fuck it.
What does he do now? Is he just
don't know.
Just
I can look it up if you like.
No, I don't like the look up. I don't.
Okay.
Like I can put in the end notes. That's the thing. I like.
You'll never understand what it was to have to go to a library to answer a question.
This is what. Yeah, I do think about this often because I think of myself as like not an unintelligent dude, but if I don't have Wi-Fi and someone else has Wi-Fi, they're immediately smarter than me.
Well, not necessarily.
They are. They got the access to everything. You know
it doesn't
I mean?
make them smarter. Nothing. It just it means they've got more access to the knowledge. They wouldn't need it if they were smarter.
They wouldn't need the knowledge. Just remember.
They wouldn't need to look it up, would they?
That's true.
I'd be curious. That Michael Brandon now at a guess. I'm dying to look it up.
Itching.
Fuck knows.
You're looking train spotting here, just scratching away at yourself. You want to know?
Who knows? He's either seen the light. You know what? A guy like Michael Brandon might have realised that he's a fuckwit and now works with fucking Rwandan orphans or something.
He could, but that narrative rarely plays out.
Or he manages a call centre in the Philippines.
I know a lot of loose units who ended up at call centres in the Philippines managing. They get a lot of money for that. Way more than we'd make. They fucking kill it over there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's absurd. I don't know why. I don't know why racists make such good call centre managers, but well, my guy isn't a racist. He was just a lunatic.
Yeah.
That proper kind of like that guy at the pub who will throw something. Like if a certain series of events occur, this man won't hesitate in throwing a chair.
Well, that's who you need supervising fucking 300 people. But
you'd listen to him.
Yeah, you listen.
It was a big boy. So this is like Adelaide in the 90s. They had that. I just don't. I mean, I guess maybe
that's I'm going to do this a lot, right?
Yeah.
But talking about the 90s, I think you were talking with Mark Nelson. Mark Nelson is a total because this podcast is about UK Australia, isn't it?
It's about coming to the UK from different Commonwealth countries and also a bit of Australia.
Okay, well, I don't know if you've heard how much British people of my age, especially 40 and over, fucking worship the 90s, right? They just love Mark Nelson loves the 90s so much. Those dudes all love the 90s, but their 90s was way different to Australia's 90s. Right. When they talk about 90s, they're talking about Britpop, Oasis versus Blur, all that kind of shit, right? And our 90s was more Seattle grunge, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, plus the rock, Guns N' Roses, all that kind of shit. I know that those bands had followings here as well, but that was more. It was just a different kind of a 90s. And Australia's always got its own domestic thing going on. We obviously, I'm an Oasis fan. I brought back a burned copy on cassette of Definitely Maybe when, 94.
Can you burn a cassette? Is that what it was called back in the day?
Tape it.
Tape it. There you go. Tape on tape. Yeah. I was going to be like, Jesus, I thought we burned CDs and a cassette you just re-record. You record again. You double.
I always explain to my British mates, being an Oasis fan in Australia was so much different because we didn't have all that culture around us. You were kind of isolated listening to that music, but we didn't have the whole scene, that kind of scene with the hair and the I remember my mate, he grew his hair like Oasis and got the jacket, and just someone in Adelaide club just put a bottle over his head for looking like a fucking British cunt, Like that was seriously. Serious.
It was
Like,
that
fucking-
simple.
Yeah.
Well, but the thing I thought with the 90s and Oasis versus Blur is like here, I didn't realize how big Blur was until I kind of came here for the first time. Because I don't think Blur kind of hit. Oasis were at least a bit closer to that kind of grungy thing than Blur, who was like...
Well, Oasis had swagger and attitude. And,
Yeah.
You know,
Whereas Blur was like that kind of, you know, not
but
pretentious English band, but
your
like...
real ridgy-digi, fucking red-blooded Australian type thing in the 90s. They didn't go for Oasis because there was that thing that, you know, Poms were pussies and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And they wouldn't have gone. Whereas over here, tough dudes were into Oasis.
That's what I thought, yeah. It was tough dudes.
Yeah.
Oasis.
I mean, holy fuck. I went to Oasis's second ever last live gig because my mate was on tour with them and I got AAA passes to see them at Heaton Park in Manchester in whenever their last gig was. It was about 2010 or something. And that was just so crazy, man. It was like fucking tens of thousands of 40-plus-year-old manx, some of whom looked like they just got out of jail, didn't know the 90s were over. And like everyone was just off their... I didn't drink for 6 weeks after that gig because the sight of all those dudes who hadn't stopped taking drugs and how fucked they were, it shocked me, man. It shocked me.
You're scared straight. That's
I
what
was
happened.
scared straight. Their hardcore fans are hardcore.
Yeah, but like... Yeah, Blur is the pretentious one, right? Blur's like the kind of London, like southern Oxbridgey
park
vibe,
life and
right?
all that. Yeah, they're a bit more.
That's like the vibe.
Damon Albarn.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should make it clear that I'm talking to Ro Campbell, and the reason that he's bringing up music so much is because he used to be a roadie.
Oh, I don't know if that's why I'm bringing up music.
Well, I mean, this has been like heavy on the music so far. You've basically just been
well,
like,
it's a big thing in cultural difference. I was just talking about the 90s. So, you know, if you're talking about the difference between the 90s in Britain and Australia, yeah, I was just saying that the music part, you know, music is a big part of life in general, isn't it?
So do you reckon the 90s were like the peak British decade?
You don't have to have been a roadie to... Like, I know a million people who are fanatic about music who weren't roadies.
Oh, no, I know. But, like, I think I like the way that you talk about music is definitely kind of roadie-ish. It involves the stadium. It involves the thing. It involves the type of ticket. You know? I got in this way.
I'm definitely I'm always looking at the lighting rig first. How the fuck did they do that?
And enjoying that. But, so what? Do you reckon, like, 90s was, like, the peak kind of British decade? Obviously, since the Empire, since the good old days. Was, like, 90s, like, peak Britain?
Well, you got to put it in the context of 60s was still pretty uptight, then sexual revolution, then 70s was punk. No, I think 70s was like for a lot of the older 70s in Britain was crazy, but then at the same time there was all the other things, like there was poverty and things were quite tough in the 70s. But that would have been pretty amazing to be in the punk rock scene in Britain in the 70s, and of course AC/DC pretty much came up. They came up at the same time as Sex Pistols. So they were actually considered punk rock at the time. And then 80s was all that fucking weird glam rock shit. But 80s you had Thatcher and the fucking miners' strikes and all that kind of stuff. And then I think they came out of it. So 90s I think was probably, I wasn't here, man, but 90s was a time of, you know, slightly more prosperity combined with the youth culture sort of. So, and of course, beginning of the 90s was when ecstasy really hit. And that changed the attitude of a lot of people in Britain because they had that whole football hooligan thing and fucking in the 80s going on. And then I think from everyone I know who was a part of it, that when ecstasy come in, a lot of that violence shit faded away and
people just listen
got back into fucking hugging each other and why do we hate each other?
Put on tracksuits and listen to dance music.
But I think there came a point, like, you know, fast forward another 10 years and then they learned how to bash each other on ecstasy.
It takes time.
I think there's a bit of a renee. That hooligan shit always comes back.
Yeah, you think there's... I mean, that's... If you look at Australia, like, there was just the race riots in Melbourne on the...
I wouldn't really call it a race riot.
It was small.
It was like an Instagram riot.
Instagram riot? Like, if you take the photo from the riot angle,
you had
it seems like a riot.
You had a bunch of neo-Nazi fuckwits who
Down
probably
in St.
also
Kilda.
worship the Anzacs, so there's a contradiction immediately. That's how fucking dim they are. That they love the Anzacs who fought the Nazis and they also love the Nazis. And yeah, there was, but it wasn't, I wouldn't really call that a race. Australia's had a lot of race riots over the years.
One of those, I just meant for, it's almost 10 years, or just over 10 years since Cronulla, because that was when I was, young. I guess like 17, I think it was, or 16. I was down at the beach like the day before. One of my mates was like half Lebanese, half Italian.
Right.
And the guys there were just like, oh, you might want to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like this thing's happening tomorrow. Because like the text went around and shit, and they lived in Cronulla, so they got the message. Kind of thing. Do you not know kind of?
I know how Cronulla. Yeah, I do know. That was a fairly major event in terms of. I think that's when the Southern Cross tattoo changed, because I've got one, man.
You've got a Southern Cross tattoo,
and I got it 20 years ago.
Yeah, and now it's very different.
And from that point onwards, I feel like the Southern Cross became appropriated by racist nutters in much the way that the Hindu swastika got appropriated. So
yeah, you're like. Just one of those Hindus. Got in there early.
Yeah.
Hindu pre-1933, and now look at you.
There was probably some fucking hippie German came back from Gough in 1933 going, it means peace and love. And they're like, not anymore.
Strong German accent.
Yeah, so I got my fucking... my Southern Cross is coloured in now to Aboriginal colours, but...
really? Okay, just to kind of...
That just confuses
everyone.
That's
called like style it out. Just styling out the Southern Cross tattoo.
It confuses the racists and the Indigenous people.
Nobody knows whose side you're on.
So, yeah, Cronulla. Yep. There's been there was a whole series on TV in Australia about the Australian race riot.
Really?
Yeah, it's an interesting history. I mean, the first major ones were happened in the 1850s with the Chinese at the goldfields. And then probably again... Oh, there's a whole bunch of really interesting ones. There was a really crazy one at Kalgoorlie, man, in Western Australia between like Skippy Aussies or Anglo-Celtic Aussies. Some people call them Skippies, and the like Croatian and Yugoslavian dudes, and that was like a full-on shootout war in Kalgoorlie. That was fucking nuts.
Is this like over?
Maybe 1920s, 1930s.
Right. Was this because of the Kalgoorlie? Is that opals? No. What's Kalgoorlie? Gold. Right. It was just because of that.
I don't know what. I can't remember what the factors were behind it, but just straight up kind of racism at the end of the day. Another crazy one was the Brisbane riots, which happened with the American soldiers, and there was some weird thing there. Well, there was like 100,000 American soldiers in Brisbane, and they were pissing off all the locals, the local men, because they were flash and they had a bit more money and they dressed nice, and the women all loved them because they weren't fucking boring Queensland rednecks, and and then the tempers started to flare with these flash Yanks stealing all the Aussie birds, and then there's this weird crossover thing where. And I think they use this as an excuse, but of all people in the world, the Brisbane dudes got offended that the Americans were segregating their blacks.
What?
And so and all the unions and that got involved because like it was something like the black guys weren't allowed to, that basically they were treating the black soldiers different in the US military, and a lot of people in Brisbane claim that they were offended by that, which is obviously hypocritical given that Brisbane's treatment of Indigenous people. They've got. Well, I notice you live on Boundary Street here.
I do, yes.
Well, in Brisbane, Boundary Street is the street after which Aboriginal people weren't allowed to enter that part of the city.
Oh, right. Was this back in the day?
Yeah, and I think that went up until the 70s. But anyway, so there was a huge riot that ended up happening in Brisbane between Australian soldiers and American soldiers, and people died, and quite a lot, and a couple of hundred injured as well, and that had a racial element to it. But bizarrely was the Australians sticking up for the African Americans. But I think that was a bit of an excuse. Right. They just didn't like Americans in general. And those kind of things happen in a few Australian cities. That you can't underestimate the effect that the huge American presence during the war in America had.
Yeah.
And that's why I find it ironic that now Australia leans more heavily towards America for its culture, because we used to lean towards Britain, and now fucking everything's going American. But there was a point where we couldn't fucking stand the Yanks, because also the Americans used to boast that they saved America from the Japs. Japanese.
Saved Australia from the Japanese.
Yeah, and they used to fucking boast about that and act like it was all them, and that pissed the Australians off because many of them had fought in Papua New Guinea and Malaysia and all that kind of shit. And they're like, who the fuck do these cunts think they are? And they also, because the Australians thought that they were better soldiers than the Americans. They considered the Americans fucking all show, no go.
Right.
There was several. Oh, that's why we call them Seppos, mate.
Seppo. You finally got the origin of the term Seppo.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Do you know what a Seppo? Do you know what Seppo stands for?
Absolutely not.
You're aware that Australians call American Seppos?
I'm aware that Australians call American Seppos.
And you don't know what it comes from?
I had no idea why.
Fuck. The etymology of Seppo, it's short for septic tank.
Right.
Septic tank, yank, full of shit.
Right. And it's all the way down to Seppo. Right. Look at this. Finally someone on this podcast knows the etymology of something.
Oh, fuck. I love etymologies.
I've had Adam Rowe on here. Like, where do Scouse come from? Didn't know. Had Lauren
Didn't
Patterson.
know.
Like, why are people called Geordies? Didn't know.
That's disgraceful.
Look, I know. But you're like a buff for this stuff.
I don't know why they're called Geordies. I know why Sunderland people are called Mackhams.
Why are they called Mackhams?
Because they make the boats. They would make the boats.
Right.
And I think the Geordies would fucking... Please, can we look up why people are called Geordies?
No, I've looked up the thing with Geordies.
So Mackham is like we mack the boats.
Yeah.
And then I guess in Newcastle they put them in the water.
For Newcastle, I can't believe it. It kind of escapes me a little bit. But it is to do with like the name George. Like a lot of people
maybe
there
it was
were
a
like
common name up
called
there, right?
George and then like Geordie.
Okay, right.
It was that. There's something more specific that I'm missing,
right.
but that's it.
Yeah, okay. Because I've met a few Geordies and I always thought they were called Geordie because they were from Geordie land, but maybe that was actually their name.
Yeah. So there you go. I got some stuff. I've been doing this pod a little while now. I'm getting some knowledge.
Good stuff.
So when do you think was you said Australia shifted towards American culture rather than British? When do you think that shift was? Like what was the kind of defining? Well, not defining, but just like.
I mean, it's gradual.
Yeah.
Like there's been little things like the Americans been coming to America to Australia since the gold rush in the 1850s. So I think we picked up baseball from them, like, because baseball was very big in Australia in the turn of the century right up until the 80s. And then it kind of died. Because I grew up in a baseball family. My dad and my grandfather played and I played baseball. So, there's always been an element of, and obviously with the movies, movie culture and all that kind of thing, and music as well.
Well, just like their dominating entertainment just meant that we get more of the culture.
But we took a lot more from Britain, like tons of, you even listen like 1950s, 60s broadcasters in Australia all spoke in faux BBC, fucking British voices and all that kind of thing. So I don't know, I guess around about the 80s or something like that. I mean, in the 70s, Australia had a lot of influence. It was give and take. Australia sent a lot of exports over this way.
Yeah.
Your likes of Clive James, Jermaine Greer, all these, dare I say, Rolf Harris, all these fucking, Barry Humphries, one of the biggest, comedy characters of all time. They fucking love Dame Edna over here.
Yeah, and it seemed like we had a kind of renaissance after that with like, the second wave of comedians like Kitty Flanagan, Steve Hughes.
Is that what they call it?
Brendan Byrne. Well, that's what I call it. Like, because when like I kind of started watching comedy in like the 2000s and stuff, there seemed to be a lot of Australian people who were based here, or like since then I've seen them kind of come back.
Well, I'd say that
was like a mark of quality if they've come from here back to Australia, or an Australian who's come here. That's almost like a tick in the box. It's like, yeah, this guy's been through. UK.
Well, that's the thing. That's because, I don't know. I don't know how many Australian comedians chose to try and make it in America in the 80s, but because I started here, man. So like, I always thought, oh yeah, this is where you come. But obviously now there's lots of Australian comics that go to America. Yeah. So I'd say you either choose one or the other. Most people do. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to America. Or I'm going to go to Britain. And the attraction with Britain was back when I started. That here, if you got decent, there was the living to be made, like a decent living to be made quite quickly, which has become harder, which sucks. Whereas in America, it was more the long game, wasn't it? Like it was hard grafting away, making $50 a gig. But if you had success in America, then it's big success. Like
right.
Not that that's happened for that many dudes.
The ceiling's that much higher in America.
Like Jim Jeffries went over. He grafted here first. He could have just done that forever, just been a top level headliner doing the Comedy Store and shit like that and stayed here. But he went for the fucking biggest possible thing and he achieved it. Getting a talk show and all that. That's like pretty fucking nuts. But yeah, I think it was easy. It was easier to just graft away here and be a club comic, which has gotten a lot harder.
And you started here. Did you come here for the purpose of?
No.
No,
No, I just got the idea once I was here.
What brought you here? What took the man from Adelaide? So where'd you go first?
Oh shit! I feel like we're going on so many tangents here, but that's all right.
That's okay.
I left Adelaide.
I'm here to rope you back in.
I mean, I was in Adelaide till I was about 20.
Yeah.
Then I moved to Northern Territory and lived at the Central Australia, Uluru, but it was called Ayers Rock Resort. I worked at the Ayers Rock Resort.
What were you doing at the Ayers Rock Resort? Just like
working in kitchens.
Kitchens, okay.
Yeah, and
you do have a good short order cook appearance. I was like
a cook and a kitchen hand, and I did loads of shit there. Worked in the bakery, and that was a pretty fun year. Really, had dirt bikes and took acid and rode dirt bikes in the desert on our days off and shit. Got to know indigenous people and then left there after about a year and a half. Went to fucking India for like almost a year. Rode a motorbike around there. I don't think I've ever had more money than when I left Ayers Rock. I saved so much money there, man.
Really, just living, enjoying the life, working a lot, not spending a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's right.
And then India for a year.
Almost a year. I bought a Royal Enfield motorcycle, rode that round northern India with my friends, spent a lot of time in Nepal as well. End up teaching English in a little village in the Himalayas for 3 months. That was pretty crazy. And it was just bonkers, man, because like the headmaster of the school was a total pothead. Like we just fucking smoked weed and hash all the whole day teaching these kids, fucking boozing every night. It was like this tiny village, no electricity, nothing, fucking 3 hours walk from the nearest road. But we were just like bombed out of our heads most of the time. But it was quite fun as well.
These kids got a quality education.
Oh, well, they got fucking. It was better than anything else that was going around.
How do you get a job like that? How do you? Here's the thing. I know to someone like you, I'm sure that doesn't seem particularly strange. But like for regular people, you don't just end up teaching English in a village.
I met some posh English dudes. I met some posh English guys in Kathmandu who were like doing the organised gap year thing, which I didn't even know was a thing back then. And they were telling me, oh yes, we've been up in the mountains teaching English and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh that'd be cool. And they were like, they'd paid like $5,000 or something to an agency, and they were like, it's a load of shit, man. You could literally just walk up there.
Yeah.
And then one of these guys goes, listen, there's this village, the next village down from where I was working, and the guys built a new school, like a little private school, basically.
Yeah.
And, you could probably go there. And back then there was no internet, fucking no phones, nothing. I literally just got the place on the map, fucking made my way there. It took me like 2 days, got there, walked up there. I was like, Lekamani Adhikari, that was his name. And he said, yes. I said, I met this guy. He said, you need a teacher. And he goes, welcome. And then I fucking lived in his house for the next 3 months. He's like, every morning he'd fucking knock on the door. Rowan, sir.
Yeah.
Please. No shit, man. It would be like 10 to 5. Here we go. Rowan, sir. You must wake up. It is very late. I'd be like, it's fucking 5 a.m. And then I'd be like, yeah, I'm getting up. Fucking roosters crowing and shit. And then I'd still be lying there, and then he'd knock me again. Ron, sir, you must get up. It's very late.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a racist accent, guys. Relax. These Brits are crazy. I'm just fucking doing how he actually sounded, And then these fucking
just a little
Brits
caveat for you.
If you discuss race in this country, it's called racism. It's like, no, that's not what racism is. Trust me.
We're Australian.
I grew up in South Australia in the 80s, mate. Fucking, I've witnessed proper racism. Yeah.
Well, you just told me about it.
Yeah. Oh fuck. That's not even half of it. And and dude, I was fucking sit on a Greyhound bus in '96 coming back from the Rock going to Adelaide. The Greyhound bus lady comes up to me and goes, "Do you mind sitting next to a coon?" And I was just like, "What the fuck?" No, I was like, I couldn't fucking. I said, "Are you fucking right?"
Yeah.
Because she said that at the top of her voice in front of everyone.
Yeah.
That's
nuts.
So you can bleep that out if you want, but whatever. That's what she said.
For anyone unaware, that is a racial slur.
Yeah, well, it's a racial slur here as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I thought that was our thing. I thought that was one of the Australian only slurs. No,
the B word would be more specifically Australian.
That would be that one.
But anyway, let's not go through them all. What was I saying that? How did I get onto that?
Look, talking about racism in the 90s in South Australia.
No, but I was in fucking Nepal or something.
You were talking about waking up real early, getting woken up.
Oh, okay. How did I get from that onto racism?
Look, I don't know. You jump around.
Yeah, I do.
I'm doing the best I can to keep you focused, but we'll see. Don't worry. We've got the power to add it. I can just get you steam rolling again.
Okay. I'll just fuck knows how I got from that to that. I was talking about.
You were just talking about doing the accents. School. You were saying the accent, and then you were saying that's real racism, and then you gave.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
You
I was
an example of real racism.
Yeah, Lekamani Adikari. So he'd wake me up at 5 a.m. and then I'd finally get up, and his room was adjacent to mine. He didn't sleep with his wife, and
and then he'd separate rooms.
Yeah, they had separate room in a old school traditional, like it was very much like a Tudor house actually, but an old house made out of wattle and daub and big wooden beams. Crazy, those old Nepalese fucking village houses. Right, it was an amazing experience. Lived there 3 months. It was crazy. Just no noise, like just the only noises are just like birds, fucking animals, people, but no vehicles, no electricity, nothing.
Well, like not motorcycles, nothing.
No, there's no roads, mate. It's on a mountain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Those kids had never seen a bicycle. It was crazy.
Weird.
Went from India to and Nepal to here. I came here in '98. I lived in Edinburgh as a backpacker.
Wait, so you got to England in '98 or just the UK in '98?
I did. I arrived in England completely penniless. I caught the ferry over from fucking Belgium, Netherlands, and I spent my last I didn't realise it was my last tenner on the ferry, and then I got to Dover. I literally got off in Dover, like I didn't even have a bus or anything booked. You went to the ATM, ate my card.
Wow!
First night, and I arrived the day after England got knocked out by Argentina, and David Beckham got red carded and sent off. Right?
Oh,
and
shit!
So yeah, it was the weirdest thing for the first few weeks I was in England. Like David Beckham was the number one villain in England. Everyone hated him because he'd kicked this dude and got red carded, and they thought it was his fault that they lost. And I arrived basically the next day, and I spent my first night. I was in Dover penniless on a Saturday night. And I was like, holy fuck, what am I going to do? You know, I slept in a hedge in a church.
Slept in a hedge?
Well, like I slept in a churchyard in a book because I thought, well, that's the safest place, you know.
Churchyard,
and
good.
I could just hear all the chaos of, cunts bashing each other on a Saturday night in an English small town. And then in the morning,
Wait, is there more violence in the small towns? Is this...
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, there's nothing to do.
So are they just...
Haven't you been to small English towns on Saturday nights?
Yeah, but I'm doing the gig, and then I'm getting on a train or a bus.
Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, all these small fucking places.
No, but I do.
Also, by the way, it was a bit different back then. This is 20 years ago when every pub shut at 11.
Oh,
or 10.
What?
10. I think they shut at 10.
Wait, in the small towns or
everywhere in England?
Even
all
in
pubs
London?
shut at 10. Yeah.
10 p.m.
Yes.
Regardless.
Everywhere, mate.
Why?
It was crazy, man. That's why there was so much fighting, I reckon. And then you had to go to a nightclub. And the fights broke out. The fights broke out between the period of leaving the pub and going to the club.
Right.
But a lot of people didn't go to club. A lot of people just binge drank before that 10 p.m. bell.
Right.
I'm pretty sure. Scotland and England, there was an hour difference, and I can't remember which one was which. One shut at 10 and one shut at 11.
And then that was it for the pub. You still get takeaway alcohol like you can now?
No. You still can't in Scotland.
I know that's in Scotland, yeah, but in England you can. You can get...
I don't think you could back then. It's and that's mainly London where it's so lax, man.
Right, okay. Because I know in Scotland after 10
p.m. you're fucked. You get
so that's the same as Sydney. Interesting.
And there's no one. It's so funny because like in London, that's not the law in London, but there's always someone willing to break it. There's always some fucking bad Muslim willing to break it.
What do you mean? Just like lovely generalization.
No, I'm just kidding. But there's
but just like what?
I don't think they're legally allowed to sell 24
off
hours
licenses.
a day. Yeah. I don't think that's legal.
Get out of here.
I don't think it's legal.
But they're not sneaky about it. It's just like, here's the alcohol, you go grab it.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's not. I'm pretty sure legally they're not meant to.
I would love to know. I'm gonna have to. That's another thing I'm gonna look up at the end of this.
But no one breaks that rule in Scotland.
Right.
You just don't get no one doing that.
Okay, and then.
So I blah blah blah. I woke up penniless in a hedge.
But wait, when did the pub thing shift? I'm curious about this.
Oh, that shifted like sometime. I think it started to change early noughties, man. I came back here. I lived here as a backpacker for almost a year again, 98, in Edinburgh, just doing shitty jobs. And I held the golf sale sign on Princes Street for fucking 4 months in the winter. That was brutal.
What, you're a sign spinner?
Yeah, I'm a sign holder. Yeah, I
Oh,
was a
man.
sign holder.
Did you do the spinning or were you lazy?
I know, mate. I'll tell you, in Scotland, fucking in the middle of winter, you got adept at many moves, man. But mainly like because you know forced fucking 12 gales and shit. That sign was dangerous. Big fucking plank of plywood on a stick.
Right.
Yeah, you had to have various ways to pull that down in a hurry, and you know those signs would snap. Quite often we had to wire it to the the metal fence thing at the side of the footpath and then you were just like it was like being on a sailing ship or something. You put all your weight onto that post and then a gust of wind could snap it.
Right.
I almost fucking killed people with that sign, man. It was
Really?
one of the fucking most dangerous jobs I've ever done.
That's nuts.
Why
did they want you out there?
Fuck knows, it worked. It got people in. Yeah,
got plenty of golf sales.
Yeah, it's gone now, but yeah, I didn't have a work visa and it was 35 quid a day cash in hand. So that's and then I ended up leaving that job. Anyway, crazy story. But yeah, he docked my wages 10 quid on Christmas Eve because I was a little bit late because I was unwell. And I was expecting a bonus and I was so enraged when I opened my pay packet and it was 10 light on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
After 4 months of, fucking reliable service. That I walked out the door, I looked and I thought, nah, fuck this cunt, Went back up the stairs, pulled a golf club out of one of the sets, and I just went fucking charging in there with it. I went, give me my fucking money, cunt! Right, and he shit himself, man. And fucking, he was like, don't hit me! And fucking gave me the other tenner, and that was it. I never went back. Sometimes you got to fucking do what you got to do, man.
I mean, just going in there with a golf club, it's like poetic justice.
Fucking A, man. He shit himself.
I thought when you were like, I grabbed a golf club, like, he's going to steal this golf club and then sell it for 10 quid.
Many years later, that was my first proper stand-up bit, was talking about doing the golf sale sign, because I started doing stand-up in Edinburgh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I started.
Is this sign like well known, the golf sale sign?
Yeah, it was extremely well known in Edinburgh. It was an icon of Edinburgh because it was, and also there was one in London as well on Oxford Street, and it was like a fucking franchise. But
of signs, the sign franchise.
It was very, very well known in Edinburgh, the golf sale sign, and so my first proper bit was about holding that, and obviously it was laughs of recognition, but it was a reasonably funny bit, I suppose. Years later, I was doing it at a late show at the Fringe, and these dudes at the front were like laughing, fucking. And I'm like, what's so funny, And they're like, his dad was the boss of the golf sale sign. And I'm like, you're fucking Jim Fox's son? And he was mortified, this guy. And I was like, your fucking old man's a piece of shit, mate. He spent your fucking inheritance in the pubic triangle at the lap dancing clubs, I felt bad after because I said some nasty shit about his dad, which he probably fucking hated his dad more than anyone. But his dad was a cunt. And I told the story. I said, mate, I fucking charged at your old man with a fucking 9-iron, Get fucking 10 pounds out of the tight. He's a Scrooge cunt.
Just at a comedy show, just telling all his dad's secret to his son.
Oh fucking yeah! Well, there you go. So poetic justice.
Weird. I mean, Edinburgh is small. That seems like a small town thing.
Well, they call it the village of Edinburgh, Paul. The village of Edinburgh. Yeah. So it was quite an iconic job. That.
But no. So wait, I want to get your timeline. Basically,
so then I moved back after Edinburgh, after almost a year in Edinburgh. Then I finally went back to Australia, having travelled for a couple of years at that point. Oh, no, I didn't actually. Sorry, I went to South America with a girl that I met in Edinburgh, and I was 4 months in South America as well. Right. And then I completely, like a fucking idiot, spent every single cent that I'd saved at Ayers Rock. So at that point, I was flat broke, spent all the money I'd saved, spent all the money I'd made whilst working in the UK, and then I went back to Melbourne. That's where I moved. I went straight to Melbourne. My mother had remarried and moved to Canada. I didn't really have a family base at that point, and fucking arrived in Melbourne penniless, man. And that was a tough 6 months. I lived in a pub. In North Melbourne on the corner of the markets, the Victoria Hotel, for 6 months. Fucking
like working.
I worked in a warehouse.
Oh, no.
No, I lived in the pub. I worked in a warehouse out in Moorabbin. Actually, I fucking originally worked in a warehouse in what's that area? Springvale, man, like Heroin Central. It's the Melbourne equivalent of Cabramatta.
Oh right, okay.
And it was like rough fucking heroin area full of Vietnamese dudes. The food was amazing. And then I sort of slowly got my feet back on the ground, and then I lived in Melbourne for the next few. And then about sort of 6 months in, that's when I hooked up with one of my mates from Ayers Rock, and he got me into the roadie game. And then for the next fucking 4 years, I worked in rock and roll in Melbourne, working on, primarily big music stuff. And yeah, it was sick. It was awesome. Melbourne was so fucking happening back then. And I've been in every fucking venue in Melbourne, every single venue in every single conceivable.
What are some of the bands?
Part of it. Oh, you name it, man. Anyone who came through Melbourne from '99 till 2004, I was probably there, or all the big shit and all the small stuff as well. You name it, man. From Barbara Streisand, the first ever gig at Dockland Stadium, I was there, to Ricky Martin, Bon Jovi, Elton John, Bruce Springsteen, fucking you name it. Kiss, AC/DC, Rolling Stones, Kylie.
Do you have anything to do with
Pearl Jam,
with the bands, or is it quite? You're kind of quite.
Just depends, mate. It's all every.
Like, it's like you're always curious, like the roadie, like they get like the roadie and like, get a beer.
You got to understand, so there's different levels of roadie. So what I really was called local crew. So the touring crew comes. So a big band like the Stones has probably got like 80 touring crew, big ass crew.
Yeah.
Whereas a band like Oasis probably just have about 12.
Right.
Maybe only 10. And then they get in the locals. They get in a local crew of local dudes to assist those touring guys, right? And at that time, we had a fairly good reputation, so we were fairly decent. And then the best of the local crew get to do what they call show call, and that means you actually work on the show during the show, which not all the local crew get to do. Like, most of the local crew will come, unload the trucks, help the touring crew put all the shit together, then bang, soon as like the what's need to be done, fuck off most of the local crew because it's costing a lot of money.
Yeah, of course.
And then they keep the 3 best guys or the 4 best guys, and they stay on and do the show calls. So with a big band like the Rolling Stones or AC/DC or whatever, so I did show call for those bands. We would do, or like say the Stones did 5 nights straight at Rod Laver Arena, I'd be there for all 5 nights.
Right.
So in that sense, you get closer, you get to see more, you get more behind the curtain. You're in the catering every night with the touring crew. And yeah, I had, it's not hanging out with the band, fucking having chats with them, dude. It's the Rolling Stones. But I saw them, I saw them hanging around backstage. I saw Keith and Ronnie have an argument one night, all that kind of shit. With other band, like, dude, I worked on Foo Fighters at Festival Hall, iconic old fucking Festering Hall, they call it. It's an old boxing venue that fucking the Beatles played at even.
Wow.
But I did Foo Fighters at Festival Hall, and, Dave Grohl sat next to me at catering with his mum, and they sat right next to me and had their dinner and talked right in front of me, and I'm like, that's not normal.
That's weird. But that's close.
Yeah, because like Festival Hall's like real small facilities. Dave Grohl's not pretentious.
Yeah. What was his mum doing? Does she live in Melbourne?
No, yeah, no. He takes his mum on tour. Yeah, and I remember they were talking about.
Dave Grohl takes his mum on tour.
They were talking about poetry, funnily enough. Yeah, he takes his mum on tour. She just wrote a book about fucking mothers of rock stars. It's meant to be really good. I can't remember what it's called, but she interviews other rock stars' mothers.
Right.
Yeah, and even like not just rock stars, but like Dr. Dre's mum and shit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's meant to be a real good book.
Good Dave Grohl insight. Okay, so you've done the roadie thing, and then you've come back again to the UK.
Then I met a Scottish girl in Melbourne, and then blah blah blah. Had a relationship with her. End up moving back over here on a working holiday maker visa, which I hadn't used up the first time because I was illegal the first time. And
nice, good, like the old days.
It was a lot easier back then.
Getting in on the boat, just wander through.
Yeah, and then I came back, and I got into the local crew in Edinburgh, so I was doing that same shit in Edinburgh, but it was nowhere near as much fun, and there was nowhere near as much big gear. In Edinburgh, it was like most of the rock and roll stuff happened on Sundays and Mondays and shit. Because Friday, Saturdays, they were doing big places. And then I worked as a stagehand on the 2004 Edinburgh Fringe was my first one working as a stagehand, and that's when I met Jamoan, the Irish Australian comic and
superstar of Australian comedy. One of the big names. If you don't know, Jamoan for Australian comedy is like one of the first few.
Yeah, he's
stars.
He's huge, and he's a very, very good comic as well. And I've known him since 2004, and then I don't know, we just met hanging out. I met him through the Spiegel tent because my friend Brett Haylock used to manage the Spiegel tent, friend from back home, from Adelaide, from the 90s. And that's how I met Jamoan. And then Jamoan was like, oh, you know, where's your show? And I was like, I don't have a show. I'm not a comedian. And he was like, oh, fuck. He goes, mate, you should do stand-up. You know, you're a funny guy. And
wait, Jamoan told you to do stand-up?
He probably didn't mean it. He's probably just drunk, you know. Yeah, it's good to have someone to blame, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's great, though. Jamoan to do it. I had like some guy at
that was my main thing that pushed me because I had thought about it. I've been thinking about it. I had been watching a fair bit of stand-up at that point. And then I was like, okay, well, I've told Jamoan I'll do it. And I said, Jamoan, fucking next time I see you, I'll have done it. So I set myself like... It still took me about 6 months to get round to it, but February 2005, so about 6 months after the Fringe 2004, I did my first gig at the Stand Comedy Club, February 2005, so that's 14 years ago now. And then, yeah, and that was that. And then ever since, you know, I got into it.
And done it. And rose levels of Scottish Comedian of the Year.
I did win that competition back in 2010, yeah.
Now... As a very admittedly Australian person,
yeah,
does that title not does it bother other people?
At the time it did. It was somewhat controversial and made the front page of Chortle, and I think the headline was "Booze as Aussie crowned Scottish Comedian of the Year." No, it wasn't popular on the night. It was a weird thing, man. And maybe for various reasons. Maybe, you know, a lot of people probably booed because they just thought I wasn't the funniest.
Right.
I know one of the other acts, he had a lot of supporters there, you know, being his hometown, Glasgow and everything. It was a big venue back then. Like, it's gotten a lot smaller, that Scottish Comedian of the Year. I think it was like fucking only half sold this year. But back then it was in a big, you know, rock and roll venue, Carling Academy. There was like 800 people there, but there was no heating and it was freezing.
Right, okay.
No shit, man. Like, everyone was like, you could see, if you look at the photos of me when I win that, you'll see I'm wearing a big coat on stage. That's how cold it was. There was like fucking fog coming off our breath. But yeah, people booed when I was announced the winner, and fucking people were chucking plastic cups and shit. It was all a bit, it was quite mad. It was a weird one.
What a spectacle.
And then it all kicked off online as well because Facebook was Facebook.
That was just starting?
Yeah, it was it was the early day. It was 2010.
Oh, 2010. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you started in 2005.
It was about December 2010.
2010. Okay. Yeah, that'd be Facebook
and it was
peak years.
Yeah, and like, so there was all this shit, and but a lot of the comedians who I'd come up with, pretty much all of them defended me. People like Mark Nelson and all these other dudes, you know. Like, the thing is, I'd started there. I fucking lived there. My style was probably Scottish because of the people I come up around.
But what would you say is like a Scottish style though? Like,
maybe that, you know.
Were you talking about Scottish stuff mostly?
Yeah, I had a lot of Scottish content. Yeah, definitely. I was talking about living it because I lived in the Shetland Islands, man. That's the other thing. My girlfriend, my Scottish girlfriend, she worked in the Shetland Islands, so I lived there for 2 years in the middle of fucking bumfuck nowhere on like a remote croft. Not even on the main island in Shetland. You had to catch another boat once you got there.
The Tasmania of the Shetland
Islands. I had to catch,
the little one.
Dude, I just laugh at people when they talk about long journeys to gigs and all this. Like, no one can outdo me on that shit. Because my first 2 years of stand-up, I lived as fucking remote as you can be in the British Isles. Yeah. I lived closer to Norway, right? I lived on an island called Yell.
Yell?
An island called Yell, which is in the Shetland archipelago. You had to catch a 12 to 14-hour boat from Aberdeen. So I had to go to do a gig in fucking, say, Manchester. I would have to leave my house in Yell, right? Drive 25 minutes country roads to a ferry, catch a ferry 20 minutes over the channel onto the Shetland mainland, that's what it's called. Then drive 45 minutes Shetland mainland to the main town in Shetland, which is called Lerwick. Then catch a boat 12 to 14 hours from Lerwick to Aberdeen overnight. There's only one a day overnight.
Overnight, yeah.
Then from Aberdeen, catch a couple of hours train to Edinburgh or Glasgow, and then another 3-4 hours down to Manchester. So by the time I got to because I remember that once showing up at the Frog and Bucket, there's dudes like Carl Donnelly were there going, oh, fuck, man, journey here was a nightmare, you know, because they come from London.
Yeah.
Fucking 6 hours on the M6. I'm like, dude, I've just spent 14 hours on the North Sea and then another fucking 8 hours, you know. So, like, it used to regularly take me 24 hours to get places for gigs. But that was an absolutely insane and unsustainable unsustainable sort of way of living. But I did that 14-hour ferry 42 times.
What?
And I would go to Shetland for a couple of weeks, and then I would spend a couple of weeks on the British mainland. And that's how I did the first 2 years of my comedy.
And you were still going out with the girl? Like, you didn't just stick around on the Shetlands?
I mean, it took its fucking toll. And then I went back to Australia for a visit during the time I lived in Shetland. And while I was there, I picked up rang up the local crew I worked for in Melbourne. This is 2007 or late 2006. And I said, oh, look, I'm back home for fucking Christmas and stuff, but I could do with a bit of work. And they said, no worries. And they put me on the load-in of Little Britain Live, the first show in Australia of Little Britain Live at Rod Laver Arena. And I worked with the British crew. And obviously I'd been working with crews in Britain, so I kind of knew the British crew kind of vibe as well as the Australian crew vibe. And, I was a good worker back then, man. I was a good local crew stagehand. And they said, after that first show, they said, you're great, man. Fucking, what are you doing for the next 2 months? And I said, well, I'm meant to be going back to the UK. And they're like, oh, that's a shame because you could come on tour with us.
Yeah.
And so I went, fuck it. And I changed my plans. And so I toured Australia. Ironically, the biggest tour I ever did in Australia was a comedy tour, Little Britain Live. I toured 7 weeks.
Wow.
And I went all over Australia with Little Britain Live, doing a week in every major place.
I didn't even realise they did a live show. I just thought
a huge live show, man. Really? Playing arenas. In Sydney, we did Hordern Pavilion, Sydney Entertainment Centre.
Wow.
We did a week in Hordern, fucking few nights in Sydney Entertainment Centre, week at Rod Laver Arena, Melbourne, week in the Brisbane Conference Centre.
Were you there just trying to be like, actually I do a little bit of comedy?
I became friends with that. I didn't become pally with Williams and Lucas. David Williams is a fucking massive cunt, by the way. I've never, the whole crew just hated him. I've never known another performer who was so hated by his crew. Like, just so hated him so much. He's quite a nasty person. I don't know what the legal implications, but they'd been on the road with him for 2 years, right? They'd been touring Britain with them
2
for 2
years.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, they made 27 million quid each, those dudes, out of that tour, man. So,
wow.
Yeah, but they'd been stuck in tour buses touring every bumfuck provincial British place for 2 years, and their big payoff was going to Australia and New Zealand, right?
Right.
But they fucking hated Williams by this point, all of them, every single one of them. Hated him with a passion. Matt Lucas less so. He was, he wasn't too bad. But the other male actor in the show was called Paul Putner, and he's a fucking lovely bloke. And he used to do a bit of stand up. He's quite a well known comedic actor in England. And I told him I did stand up, and we became buddyish. And he was real nice to me. And I every year pretty much run into him in the Loft Bar at Edinburgh, and he'll just be up there doing a visit. And he's always so cool, man. He always call me over. He's usually drinking with some fucking big knob fucking dudes. I don't know, Phil McIntyre or whatever. And he's always like, oh, this is Ro. He toured Australia with us. And
right.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, I had even though I was probably the lowest ranking dude on that tour.
Yeah.
I was the lowest set. I was called a set carpenter, but I was really doing the scenery changeovers and that. But I was quite a, I had a presence there anyway. I played a lot of pranks and had a good laugh. I was quite
played a lot of pranks.
Yeah,
on
we
tour.
did. Yeah.
Well, what's a prank?
I fell out with the fucking all the makeup and wardrobe girls. They used to do our laundry, and then I fucking froze a cane toad on dry ice. And,
what?
In Brisbane, and they fucking refused to do. They never washed my laundry again.
What? Wait, just to fuck with them? You just put it in your laundry?
Yeah, well, I told the Brisbane crew that I'd never seen a cane toad because I'm from South Australia. We don't have them. So they brought one in an ice cream container. And then they go to me, now, to be a proper fucking Queenslander, mate, you got to kill one. So I was like, okay, I'm like, it's a fucking cane toad, mate. I grew up with a father who loved to shoot anything that was introduced species.
Sorry, we should just say the cane toad, for anyone who doesn't know, was introduced
from
Queensland to get rid of the cane
beetle.
Snake. What's the name?
Cane beetle.
The cane beetle.
Yeah, but it couldn't reach the cane beetle. Because the sugar cane grew differently in Australia. It grew higher.
Right.
And in South America, it could reach the cane beetle, and in Australia, it couldn't. So it just then started eating everything else. And it's poisonous. And
yeah, it's like a plague, and you can't get rid of it.
I think you're like meant to fuck. It's like compulsory to kill one if you...
Yeah, you're supposed to. Yeah. It's good for the environment.
So we had dry ice backstage for the smoke machines. So that's the most humane way to kill it. So I was like a primary school child. I had this cane toad in an ice cream container. I went into the makeup and wardrobe girls and I went, look what I've got. Yeah. And they go, oh my God, what are you going to do with it? And I said, we're going to kill it. And they're like, no! And we're like, it's a fucking cane toad.
Yeah.
And then we were being
context.
We were being so childish because all the other set carpenters, we were going, the toad must die. The toad must die, right? And they're going, don't you dare kill that toad. And for some reason, even though all the other dudes were in on it, I became the ringleader and I procured the dry ice. And so the girls were on the minibus to go back to the hotel after the show. And I'm on the outside of it and I go, look what I've got, girls. And they go, no, no. And I take the lid off the ice cream container, pour the dry ice onto the toad. And they're all freaking out, banging the fucking window of the minivan. And there's just this smoke rising. And then I pour the thing out and it's like a frozen solid cane toad. And we start kicking it around on the concrete floor of the backstage area. Because the minibus is parked backstage, right?
Yeah.
And they all flipped out, man. They treated it like I'd fucking drowned a kitten, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
and it's like this filthy fucking introduced species that kills everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, they frosted me out after that, man. That
was enough.
They wouldn't wash my clothes, nothing, man.
You're telling me that like kicking around a cane toad in front of them was too much?
You kill one fucking reptile for amusement.
Toads, reptiles?
I don't know. Amphibian.
That's the thing. It's amphibian. I don't know a reptile.
I don't know. Amphibian.
I wasn't sure. Cold-blooded. Cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded.
You got it.
Dave Chappelle.
Got to do it.
Rick James, bitch.
Oh, man.
Did you know Rick James was in a band with Neil Young?
I did not know Rick James was in a band with Neil Young.
In the 70s in Canada, yeah. That's a crazy crossover.
I like that with you. If there this lull that you were so afraid of happening in the conversation, that was like a hint of a lull, and you just dropped a fact in. I mean, obviously you're in the Shetlands, like, because of the relationship. Like, you kind of had to live there.
Yeah.
I guess that was like part of the deal going back.
Yep.
But like, and then just kept you Scottish. No temptation to go anywhere else. No temptation.
I lived in Manchester for a few years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I broke up with my girlfriend. You know, at the end of the day, the comedy did sort of, you know, it was just too much of a pressure. You know, she didn't start going out with a comedian. Wasn't what she signed up for. And she was a school teacher, mate. So it's like she's working Monday to Friday, and then I'm fucking off every weekend. And in the end, something had to give, you know, unfortunately.
I think that's a pretty common thing with comedy. Like, people rarely stay with the person they were with before they got into comedy. Like, if that kind of happens in the course of a relationship, because you do have to kind of sign up to it.
It was hard. And all, you know, and I kind of wanted, I mean, eventually, like, becoming single after 5 years in a relationship, you know, my first, I enjoyed being single for a period of my, you know, doing the comedy and just being able to do whatever the fuck I wanted, getting more female attention than I had been used to up to that point, I suppose, for a few years. It's gone now.
It's over?
Pretty much.
That's
you can always get hero pussy, you know what I mean? But like,
hero pussy.
The thing is, a good-looking male comedian can get laid even if they're not funny. But a dude like me, you got to slay. And if you really slay, you can always get hero pussy, man. Because, you know, I think there's a certain type of woman who finds a man on stage attractive if they're
funny,
if they're dominating.
If they're dominating,
I think they like that.
If they're
power control, but that's the only place have any power or control. You know, off stage I'm a fucking shambles. So. They soon see through that shit.
Right, okay. So it's just in that moment, in that time, when he was on the stage with the microphone, with the loud voice.
Yeah.
Do you think that's more so here than in Australia? Do you think that's everywhere?
Oh, I think comedians are higher status in Britain.
Yeah.
Like in Australia, there's always like this sort of like pitying look, like, oh my God, and what's your other job? Or like here, comedians do have higher status, and there's some people ask here, oh, how much do you make, or this, that, and the other. But I think because comedy club culture is massive here, and there's 20 comedians at least that are multimillionaires.
It's not to be pitied here. It's not
nowhere near as much. No.
It's like, oh, do you play my favorite club?
You've definitely got more status here for sure. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in Australia it's kind of like, oh, so like you're gonna do like a movie or TV thing, right? Like you want to act.
Yeah.
You're doing this thing to pay the bills between the acting, and it's like, no.
That's the shitty thing in a way, is that, fucking hell, man. It's like literally every other job under the sun pays more in Australia. Like you could clean toilets or fucking weld or fucking lay bricks or teach or whatever. Everything pays more in Australia except for comedy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
facts.
Fuck. So that's solid. And everything's really crazy expensive. And that's the one big thing that's changed in the time I've been here. Like I go back to Australia now and everything's so expensive, man.
Even in Adelaide, or
God.
Like even in the
me,
home sound?
it's like everything's like 3 times more. Just shit like cans of Coke and Snickers bars are like 3 times more, dude.
Is that a big amount of your
whatever.
outlay?
It's an easy comparison to make.
No, I just like when people do like the comparison between things. It's just like, yeah, man, you know how much you got to pay for a Snickers in Australia? And I'm like, well, that's like a 3 times a year expense.
Right.
Like
well,
it's gonna no. I'm not making fun of you. I'm just saying I do it as well. Because like here, it's just kind of like, man, just a cup of coffee in London. It's just like, yeah, but just drink instant. Stop it.
Well, there's some things that are...
I mean, you did force me to leave the house to get you a proper coffee. You would not cop an instant.
Coffee here. I mean,
you said I want a black coffee. I was ready to go.
Yeah, not
instant.
a black instant roast. This isn't jail, man. What the fuck, dude? You know?
Do they get that in jail? Maybe I'd be all right in jail.
Yes, that's what everyone slings in. Jail's all about coffee now because they can't smoke anymore. So the big trade is in instant coffee and they sell it in bindles, dude. And like, so the dudes that don't drink coffee, they sell fucking coffee in bindles. And like little plastic wraps of coffee, and that's the trade. It used to be cigarettes, but they can't fucking smoke in there anymore.
Wait, they're not allowed to smoke in jail. That's like banned. They allowed the vape?
Yeah, they're bringing in UK. They're bringing in vapes for prisoners now.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
that is such niche knowledge. This is why I'm really wanted to have you on this for factoids like that.
I'm obsessed with jail shows and shit, man. I watch so many. I've watched that many fucking jail shows. I've done the equivalent of an 8 stretch in the world's toughest prisons.
Oh yeah, you got to see those on YouTube every now and again. Just to check it out, just to check in, see where they're at.
What else were we? Can I just say something on a random note?
Of sure.
That, with Australia, because Ali G, right?
Yes.
Big comedy character, arguably the most successful comedy character in recent times.
Sacha Baron Cohen's biggest character.
How much of that fucking character did he lift off of Norman Gunston? I'm telling you, bro.
Who's Norman Gunston?
Oh my god.
Who are these? What are these
Norman
references?
Gunston was this fucking amazing comedy character by Gary McDonald in Australia, who it was a very similar thing, you know.
Norman Gunston.
Yeah, and he played this hapless journalist who would pose as a real journalist and interview big people like Paul McCartney, fucking shit like that. He interviewed the Beatles and shit. And but he would involve him. He was involved as a journalist in real time events. Like he was there for Gough Whitlam's Dismissal, but he's doing it in comedy character.
Oh,
and
wow.
asking, but straight faced and shit.
Yeah.
And I honestly think Ali G I reckon Ali G saw that and lifted the idea.
That's another for the footnote.
Yeah,
Ro Campbell giving you
check out
material.
Norman Gunston, man, because really the Norman Gunston highlights are quite incredible. Particularly the dismissal of Gough Whitlam, being there for this major, probably the biggest political event in Australia's history.
Yeah, definitely.
And he was right there in character.
Right, just playing his part.
Yeah,
never breaks.
I can't believe you've never seen Norman Gunston,
dude. I'm significantly younger than you. I don't know.
And I'll tell you another. I'll tell you who this is a crossover with, because in terms of influencing modern. I think I was going to start this before, but I lost my way. So I think the two sort of godfathers of what's become, like, you know, became alternative comedy, they call it in Britain.
Right.
So after the mainstream sort of working man club shit in the 70s. It sort of gradually changed. I think Billy Connolly had a big effect on that, and obviously he's pretty global, and he had an effect on Australia. You know, everyone in Australia had Billy Connolly records.
You'd consider Billy Connolly alternative comedy for him?
Definitely, 100%. He's telling stories.
So why don't we just do the divide?
But I think the other big one is Connolly was definitely an alternative comic. You know, he wasn't telling jokes; he was talking about his life.
Yeah, right.
And making it funny, and he was going into dark territory as well, especially back then, criticising the church, fucking all kinds of crazy shit. But the other big one, who funnily enough got his start in Australia, really, is Dave Allen. Dave Allen, the talk show host.
I know Dave Allen.
And he started in Australia,
right?
And then he moved back over here, and he's also like credited. You know, this isn't necessarily an independent thought of mine. A lot of comedians agree, but he also had that big show that everyone used to watch, and he also used to tell stories and go near the edge with the subject material, and he's also quite widely considered to have had a big influence on alternative stand-up comedy.
Okay, so just for the people who aren't probably as aware of comedy history as most. You're saying like the working man's clubs, that was people doing jokes, like, you know, essentially.
Yeah, mother-in-law jokes and racist jokes and
the
shit
same
like
jokes as well. Like they'd
sharing jokes,
joke sharing and
all that.
And then Connolly and Allen they've kind of come along and made it personal.
Definitely, 100%.
And that was the start of alternative comedy here.
I would stand by that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No, just because I know that I've also here people have talked about like a kind of, I guess, like almost like a second wave alternative comedy with guys like Arthur Smith.
Oh, that was the thing you said on that podcast I listened to.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith is a legend, of course.
Yeah.
But you said, oh, we don't have that culture in Australia. In Britain, you have like second generation comedians, and we don't have that in Australia.
Yeah.
So I actually was curious to know whether that was true. So I put a post on the Hood, which is an Australian comedy forum.
Oh, okay.
And I come up with 6 fucking second generation comedians.
I don't even know this forum. The Hood.
The Hood, yeah, it's the Melbourne Comedy Forum.
Ah. The Hub. The Hub.
The Hood.
The Hood. Okay.
Yeah. The Brotherhood. It was set up in memory of the late, great Dave Grant.
Right.
Rest in peace. Great man.
Here we go.
There's a whole number of them. Of course, you got Marty Fields, son of Maury.
No. Never heard of him.
Maury, you know who Maury Fields is?
No.
Fucking dude, man, you millennials. What? Maury Fields is like the old school joke teller type guy.
Right.
And he was on Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Okay.
So everyone in Australia knew him. Well, his son Marty Fields is a comedian, and he's kind of gone very much his father's way. He does old jokes but pretends they're his, I think.
Sure.
He cracked the shits at me one night at the Comics Lounge because I was hosting.
Yeah.
I forgot to plug his joke book that he sells after the show.
Oh, well.
So he comes backstage, he goes, I made $300 fucking less than last night, mate, because you forgot to plug me book. Say thanks. And I'm like, sorry, man, I'm not used to plugging
the joke book.
Books.
Is it like, is it just a collection of jokes, or did he supposedly write all the jokes?
It's fucking there. They're all nicked.
No, but I just mean, like, is he saying like jokes by Marty Field? Here's 1,000.
Well,
of them.
he might be, but they're not his. They're old.
Oh, yeah.
They're old fucking jokes. There's a couple of others. Steve Allison, apparently his father's a comedian, still doing gigs at age 78. Shane Bourne's father, you know Shane Bourne.
I know Shane Bourne.
He was also on Hey Hat Saturday. His father was a comedian.
Right.
Then you've got Fiona O'Loughlin, whose daughter's a comedian. There's a couple of others as well. Someone wrote, I didn't write it down actually, but someone else said there was one where the son started doing stand-up.
Yeah.
And then the dad started doing stand-up after the son. This is in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And then the dad did Raw.
Right.
The heat of Raw. Came off, started feeling unwell, collapsed and died. Backstage at Raw. I'm fucking swear to God, man.
That's nuts.
I know, it's pretty fucking crazy. Sorry if that's your family member out there triggering.
Jeez, what? The dad. I was going to say.
So you got to remember, like, Australia does have a comedy history. I mean, it's different because we're a fucking isolated frontier place. But, you know, we had a music hall type here. Obviously, stand-up started, you know, its origins are in the music halls and all that kind of thing. And if you're traveling around Britain, and you should check out some of the old music halls because they're amazing places. There's a good one in Leeds. There's a crazy old one in Glasgow, the Britannia Panopticon. There's a couple in London that you can go and check out that are still, I can't remember their names, but Andre Vincent's the guy to talk to. He's an expert in all that old music hall shit. But we had a similar type thing in Australia.
Music halls.
Yeah, music hall variety stuff. And you know, that was the precursor to stand-up in Australia as well, I would say.
Right.
And one of the biggest acts was from Adelaide. His name was Roy Reen. I think his name was. Yeah, he had a character called Mo, whose catchphrase was "Strike me lucky."
I love that Australian shit.
And we have like a statue of him in Adelaide, but he was like a fucking Dutch Jew who got into the music hall stuff real young, and then he moved to Sydney. He was a big star, man. He was huge. He was in films, fucking everything.
Roy Reen.
Strike me lucky. It's Roy, R-E-N-E, and I'm not sure if it's pronounced Rennie or...
Yeah, so what draws you to doing gigs in all these different places? Like,
it just happened, really. I mean, it was like, I guess because I think I started to be ready to do those gigs around about the time that it became more of a possibility.
Right.
And there were certainly guys doing it fucking long before me, but, you know, guys like Craig Campbell and Glenn Wool spring to mind were doing, you know, international stuff, you know, a long time ago. But I came in, I think, you know, because I think I started doing international stuff around about 2010.
Right.
Probably, yeah. And no, that's not true, actually. probably 2000. I remember I went to Estonia with Damien Clark 10 years ago in 2009 because I was there. Yeah. Anyway, fucking whatever.
So what's the appeal in doing that?
I think I don't know. I think I got a little bit of a rep as being like I'm quite flexible, so I can work in different. Some British acts become so British that all their references are British, or some acts just struggle to adapt to different type of environments. Right. And I feel like I thrive in that, and I have a lot of material that I feel like only works in those kind of international gigs. And I've built up a bank of that, and I like to go and do those gigs so that I can do that stuff. And it's funny, I could do that shit in a club here and it probably wouldn't fly that good, but I go over there and it flies better. So
is it stuff about the UK? Like, what's it about? Like,
I've written a lot of stuff in different countries, so and I keep those on file, So I got
got jokes for those
Vietnam
countries.
file, Malaysia file, India file. You know what I mean? You end up building up that stuff. So, but yeah. Yeah, I've performed in a lot of different countries all around Europe. And I've seen it, some places you play into a lot of locals, like in Scandinavia, you're often playing, and Netherlands, you're playing. I go to the Netherlands every year. That's probably one of my favourite places.
Yeah.
And, because the Dutch all speak good English, same as Scandinavia. But then if you go on to like when you're doing gigs in fucking the Alps or Switzerland or whatever, you're playing to mainly expats or international people, very international people.
Yeah, sure. So have you noticed, like, does the material have to change? Like, do you have to, like, with the level of English, like obviously references, I think obviously they need to switch.
You obviously, you become adept at speaking a bit more clearer and, getting rid of your slang terms and all that kind of thing. Sometimes it's a trial and error. I mean, I've been to India 3 times to do comedy. The first time, I suffered such a spectacular death, and I was doing well, man. I was probably killing really for 15 minutes, and then I started doing this bit that I was doing at the time about David Hicks, the guy from Adelaide who ended up in Guantanamo Bay, and it was a bit that really used to kill here, but. It was like something about, I don't know, and I got one of the worst heckles I've ever had because I was dying so hard talking about this guy in Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.
And this like sort of well-off, well-spoken Indian guy just yelled out, "Take a break, buddy." And then I was like, fuck. And I come off and the promoter was like, man, he was like, Indians, they don't want to hear this fucking, and this is probably different now because the Indian comedy probably more than anywhere has exploded. It's a huge market. Yeah. There's so many comedians in India. I probably have about 100 on my Facebook. I have so many Indian comedians on my Facebook. But back then it was more new. And I'm talking, this is about 2010. And he was like, Indians don't want to hear so much about, grim realities. We got enough problems, they want
right.
Whether or not that was true. But I did take that on board, drop that bit. And then, from then on, the shows were a lot better. And I was working with a guy then called Anuvab Pal, and I think he's been in London recently. But he's so shit hot, man. And that was the other thing. They had me closing over him on the first night. And I said, listen, man, fucking stick Anuvab on. I'll open.
Yeah.
Stick Anuvab on. And that was way better then.
Oh, man. It was actually...
like, don't stick me on last just because I'm the white guy. Because,
I think Australia definitely had a kind of small country mindset, and I think that shifted recently. It's like, no, I'm not coming here to be a bartender. I'm coming here to be a fucking lawyer. What's the difference?
Well, there were probably always some people that did that. You like your classic, like your Jermaine Greers and your Clive Jameses. But yeah, I don't know. We've grown up. We're more sensible. Fuck knows.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think we have? I
don't know. I mean, some people are utilising their dual citizenship.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Like, it's like me. I did both. I went as a backpacker and then came back.
Right. With the visa. But you have heritage as well?
No.
Okay. So you just stayed on.
You're on a visa. Yeah. I got my visa through my relationship.
Right.
Yeah. And then I did my time, and then I get to keep the visa. So I've got, my visa doesn't even exist anymore. I don't think it's called indefinite leave to remain. Or if it exists, you only had to do 5 years in the UK to get IDLR, and now you have to do 20.
Whoa!
I know, so
20.
I was lucky, but I should have become. I'm eligible to become a British citizen, obviously, after this long. but the price has gone so much more. So I could have done it for like 700 quid a few years back.
Yeah.
And now it's gone up to like a couple of K, I think. So I'm
really?
kind of like, I can't be bothered.
Everything getting jacked up.
Yeah.
On the price of the old visa. Would you want to?
It gives me security. If I ever stay away for longer than 2 years, I get the boot, man.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So when you get that, would you have like any kind of ideological reason for not doing it? Like, some people take their citizenship and all that stuff quite seriously. I can
still be Australian.
Yeah, I know, but like with like the double, like I don't want to be a British citizen.
No, I'd see if it was free and it was easy. That was the other thing when I started filling in the forms. It was like I'd had too many absences. They're very strict on how much time you spend out of the country, and obviously with the doing comedy all over the place. In the last few years, I've spent a good part of the year in Australia and all that.
Yeah,
I'd actually been absent too much to qualify.
Okay,
so I would have to have a period of. It's something like you can't have had more than 130 days absent in the last 2 years, which...
Wow, that's not... That's not very long.
No, I quite often have that in 1 year.
Yeah, 130 days. Yeah.
I mean, I used up a whole passport in 2 years, my last one.
Well, you finished your passport?
In 2 years. Whole fucking thing.
That's nuts. That's a lot of moving around.
I've been through fucking 4 passports as a comedian.
That's got to be some kind of record. That's a lot of passports.
You got to remember that we Aussies get a stamp every fucking place we go in Europe.
Of course.
The Brits don't, you know.
Plus,
I do comedy in all these fucking weird places like Vietnam, Cambodia, and I have the poorer a country, the bigger their visa stamp is. So like Cambodia and Vietnam use a whole page.
Yeah.
And I've been to both those countries like 6-7 times.
I've actually got a Cambodian thing. Yeah, I know exactly
like
what you mean.
Half my passport is fucking Cambodian Vietnamese visa.
The bigger the stamp, except for America, or maybe that's just an indication that America is a poorer country than we think.
True.
Ominous.
Morally poor, my friend.
Speaking of, I gotta shoot, man. I gotta pick up my passport.
You do?
Yeah, I'm flying tomorrow to get a new passport.
Where are you going?
Estonia.
Oh, you're going to Estonia. Oh, yeah. Fuck.
Estonia tomorrow.
Well, they're right at the. They're right on the. You know, if there's a world war, they're right there on the. They'd be nervous, those guys, man, because they got fucking Russia there.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of activity happening there. I imagine the Americans have a presence in Estonia.
Maybe. I mean, I'll ask. I'll let them know.
Yeah, they had the big singing revolution. That's what they did. The Russians were there, and then they all hundreds of thousands of Estonians fucking gathered and sang Estonian folk songs so badly that the Russians like had their fingers in their ears, going, "When will these cunts stop singing this shit?" And then they left.
Get out of here.
It's called the singing revolution.
The singing revolution.
Like, please stop. And they're like, they're not going to stop. Let's just go.
Good way to do it.
Famous.
Good way to go about it. All right, Ro Campbell. Anything you want? Want the people to
you
see
can look
somewhere?
at a few articles I've written on Music Republic magazine. If you Google my name in Music Republic magazine. Haven't put one out for a couple of months because I don't know, they wouldn't publish my last one for legal reasons, which kind of pissed me off because I put a lot of work into it. I wrote an article about that Jamal Khashoggi fucking Saudi Arabian guy being killed, and the editor was like flipping out about it being so. I think he was being paranoid. He was like, "We could get killed for publishing this," and I'm like, "Dude, no, we won't." Like, you're not that important. We're not that important. I mean, I wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia anytime soon. But,
Alright, so that's my chat with Ro. Obviously a true king, a legend of the game, a man who has been in entertainment in so many different forms for so many years. You can't help but enjoy chatting to him. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. As always, if you did, please do subscribe. No matter where you're listening, there's always a way to subscribe. That way, you know every time an episode comes out, which is on a Monday, UK time at some point. I'll catch you guys next week. Got some really fun guests coming up. I'm excited for that. As always, get in touch if you want to at Dan Muggleton, Instagram and Twitter, muggletondaniel@gmail.com. And if you like me in this, maybe have a crack at my stand-up comedy special. It is called Daniel Muggleton, Let's Never Hang Out. It's available from my website. There's a direct link there, or you can just look it up on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Vimeo, Amazon. It's bloody everywhere. So Daniel Muggleton, Let's Never Hang Out. It would be cool. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It was recorded before I came to the UK, when I was still a young boy with, wide eyes and a tan. Because in Australia, you just tan. You don't have to try. All right, guys. Good chatting to you. I'll see you next Monday. Keep wrapping your ears around the Union Jack off. Cheers.